Good evening. So it's Feinstein. This is Monday night, April 30th, and it's in the month of Adar, the Hebrew calendar. It's the 12th going into the 13th. And I guess most of you recognize it. It's the Passover season coming up, 2 days. So technically, the, the holiday of Passover is on the 15th of the Hebrew calendar. But nevertheless, the 14th plays a big part because that is when the Paschal offering, the Passover sacrifice was made. And therefore, we start uh, stopping the use of chametz and eating it and possessing it after in the afternoon of the 14th. And because the night of the 15th, 14th, and the 15th, that's when the Exodus started. So a couple points, um, just in case, again, you're going to be at a Seder. Everybody has their version of what's you can do or can't do in whatever situation you're in. And nevertheless, if you're not Jewish, that be careful. And this is a rule I'd like to tell you that oftentimes what is considered polite and proper manners and considerate um, can really run afoul. I don't mean to do the opposite, but like you want to help clear the table, or you want to help serve, um, or you want to buy something. That this is all exacerbated on Passover, as far as maybe tripping over somebody, stepping on toes, whatever, and even with the best intentions. So hold yourself back if someone asks you to do something. Okay, um, to a certain degree. Again, start out to say, I'm not a rabbi, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert in either. Just over the years, and then I guess I'm getting older, so I have seen a number of things in different situations. So I'm just giving you my opinion, because sometimes I don't hear my opinion elsewhere. And I came from the other side of the street, so to say. I grew up as a Jew, but I wasn't religious, so I observed things and had first impressions. And so just to share that with you. Now, one thing that can be is that you're used to someone gives you something um, at a table, and they give it to you. They're looking at you. It might be just for you to take first, and you might think, "Well, I need to pass it on, be polite, care about others." But sometimes there's a priority. It could be your age, could be your experience, could be your accomplishments, could be the family status. The son was the first one, the oldest son, and the father and the grandfather, and so forth. So if you have any doubt, know that you may not have to pass it on. Let that other person get it. Either you're told to give it to them, or it was be passed at another time. Just a little hint. And working in a hospital, I might have mentioned this, that I was in the Midwest, and in an area where there were very, very few Jews. Circumstances I'll explain at some time why I was there. And I received a job in a hospital, a small hospital. There was a Jewish community in one of the cities, and that's where I was living, or one of the towns. And I had a job in another hospital, maybe 20 miles away, and anything in between, well, not a sea, it was corn and wheat and soybeans. So it was like you're in an island, agricultural island, and people there were very close. They knew each other's families, many generations. But when I came in there, and they were trying to attract the Jewish population, because it was the county hospital, there was no hospital in our city, and they were very concerned. I said, don't try to even provide kosher food, because they probably won't eat it, and they're going to bring their own, and each person has their own particulars and their particular families. And the dietitian said to me, my job is to provide nutrition for our patients, and that's all patients. So you need to tell me whatever you can tell me, and I can bridge that gap. So that was very impressive to me, and not uncharacteristic for the people I met there. So getting back to the Passover, here and there, I just want to give you ideas. Other things, other questions you may have regarding interacting with Jews, especially on holidays or Sabbath, but it's another story. Um, so go on with the Seder, the Passover meal. If you happen to be there, or you just know about it. You see you might find out the matzah, the unleavened bread is very expensive, and you may see boxes, rectangular boxes or square boxes, and the matzah, and you may see boxes with round matzahs. The square ones are made or manufactured in more of a mechanical environment with a lot of supervision, and they're still kosher. I mean, if it's done properly and there's the right supervision, they can handle it. And the round ones are handmade, highly supervised, very little machinery whatsoever. So why is this detail? Okay, it's enough you buy a box of matzah, didn't want to handle the holiday. But I'm just going to give you a couple concepts, and I just want to mention that you'll find in Jewish learning, in Jewish culture, Jewish law, customs, you'll begin to see some like formulas or algorithms or templates of behavior or conduct of law. And so going with I'm not going to be able to go to detail of that, but nevertheless, with the Passover matzah, of course, was a commandment directly from God that the Jewish people to eat, and they didn't have time to have it rise in the desert, and they ran out with the dough on their shoulders. But nevertheless, dough can rise with time, especially moisture, and heat. So again, we are very careful that we don't eat anything that had a chance to rise, or that leavening process, or what's called plummets. I think hummus might translate directly into yeast, but you don't. Yeast accelerates it, but it's not necessarily absolutely necessary for something to rise if it's like sourdough bread. But nevertheless, this prohibition against eating something that has risen or fermented from certain five grains, which I'm not going to the details at the moment, but of course wheat, spelt, rye, oats, and barley, I think. But so if it's made from there, it has a chance to ferment in the chemical characteristic they've already tested it, um, enough to be a problem, and it's a serious problem. Um, so the benefits of not eating it are seriously good. So it's not just a matter of like Copernicus accidentally ate something that wasn't, but a person intentionally did it. It was you did intentionally did it, then it's not looked well upon by the spiritual beings. So going on, so Passover, one of the another reason for this avoidance of rising, and this is more on a spiritual basis. And here we go into the template or the formula that we have characteristics. There are emotional ones and there are intellectual ones. And we put a lot of emphasis on getting a hold and controlling the emotional ones and developing the intellectual ones. Among the emotional ones, you may have anger, you may have sloth, laziness, you may have arrogance, and you may have like an overabundance, a desire for physical pleasures. All of these can actually, I don't think it makes not clarification can eventually get a person into problems if they overdo it. The fundamental characteristic is necessary for survival. in some areas, but most of us don't live in the jungle, but there's other things that occur. Nevertheless, we want to stay. This one focuses on arrogance. We want to stay away from arrogance. We're not going to go into the psychological definition and why it occurs, but nevertheless, it is a haughtiness, elevation of the person, and we don't consider it a good attribute. It's questionable even if the person who displays it really deep down inside feels it's a great attribute, but that's too psychological for me. So nevertheless, we try to avoid arrogance. And they even said that one area that said, I mentioned before that God is here, God is there, God is everywhere, no place without God in essence. But they said there is one place where the revelation of God is totally minimized, to say the least, and that's with an arrogance. So yes, God is here, God is everywhere, but his revelation of Him and our awareness of Him is tremendously minimized with arrogance. And it's on the whole for dealing with society, probably not a long term advisable behavior. So with eating the matzah, in getting rid of the fomets or the rising leavening products, that we are focusing on humility and avoiding arrogance. So now, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, I heard a presentation given by one of the representatives, said that, so why don't we eat matzah all year round and stay away from leavening products? I mean, we want to keep that trend. So here comes another formula that in Judaism, and most of Judaism, Jewish law, you don't have to go all the way all the time to accomplish some things. There are some things that are absolute, very absolute. And many things have, for example, you have to give charity. Say the tithing, the 10%, although I think in biblical literature for Jews from 10 to 20%. But it doesn't say beyond that on the whole. And whereas some places you hear that says you have to give up all your wealth, all your possessions, or else you become too attached to them, you can't function, or whatever the reasoning is. I'm not here to compare it to religions, but Judaism says that 10 to 20% of the tithing, the charitable acts, will bring the rest, the other 80% up along into spiritual well-being, and you need the rest to do the mitzvahs to accomplish what you have to do. You don't have to run to someone to ask for, can I have some money to do a mitzvah? You have your own, and it gives you more free choice to do what you want with your money. So another formula is you don't have to have 100% in certain situations. In kosher food, of course we avoid non-kosher food, non-kosher animals. Sometimes there happens to be an admixture, like we avoid milk and dairy to prohibit it. And maybe there was a mixture, something dropped into it. It's up to the person's discretion if they want to touch it or bother with it, but there is a certain tolerance for that, without going into any details. On Passover, there's no tolerance, there's zero tolerance. That use a concept called mashahu, anything that exists. We can't have anything that exists in leaven, even, and there's no like if, ands, or but, or what ifs. I mean, if it happens by accident, of course, you know, by accident and by intention, even though it's a negative com- commandment, the negative deed, there's different ways of handling it and looking at it. Okay, so we're talking about we want to avoid any contact with leavening product. And it was presented to me that one of our greats and in the mystical realms or teachings said that if a person is able to avoid any smallest amount of chametz or leavening products, that it will carry him through the rest of the year for blessings. And so, therefore, between the two, one is the negative, you shouldn't have it, and the other one is a positive, it will do well if you make the effort to avoid having it. So, therefore, you might find when you go to a home of a Jewish person that, like, that place is torn apart completely. And this is maybe where the concept of spring cleaning comes in, because Passover comes in the spring, and it totally tore the house apart. And all new dishes or all dishes, pots and pans and other things that are dedicated solely for Passover. They have Passover, closets, Passover kitchens in some house. They have to lock them up even that 1 week because it's such a process. So therefore, there's a tremendous avoidance, and you might, if you see at a Passover table, depends what custom they hold, that even any possible cross contamination of something else, even as it's a doubt, it's avoided tremendously. I mean, I worked in surgery for many years, and I know what sterile technique is and breaking of sterile technique. So in some ways, sterile technique has less tolerance, and in other ways, kashrus may have less tolerance in a different manner. But it's kind of that idea, that sterile technique when it comes to kashrus and Passover, especially cross contamination, so to say. So we got into a few formulas. One is a small amount can carry a large amount. In some situations, we try to avoid overindulgence in the emotions, and we try to okay, no, I forget there was another one. So going on with the Seder, that again, the child is encouraged, is a time to teach the children, and the children are prepared in schools, all sorts of questions and all sorts of like, there's a book called the Haggadah, which we read. It's prepared for the Passover, and it's meritorious to cover the whole story of Passover in the evening of the Seder. So therefore, if you have any inkling of like, say, Jewish cooking, and you're able to come to a Seder and the possibility you could be eating there, it's likely, but um, just know you better eat ahead of time because a Seder could take 1 or 2 hours or more. And with a little bit of wine here and a little bit of matzah here, and like, when's it coming? When's this Jewish cooking? And it's not going to be for a while. By the time it is, you had enough wine that you might start falling asleep. You can eat the whole meal. Anyway, so it's this Passover Haggadah, well, I don't want to say there's a story and law book, discusses the slavery, discusses what it takes to fulfill the mitzvahs of Passover, what things have to be done at the Seder table, the implications, what it was like in Egypt. And I've got to remember that God took us out of slavery, not just to make us free birds, carte blanche, do what you want to do. It says, take out Egyptian slavery to be his people and his servants and his children. Yeah, you can have servant children, almost slave to a certain degree, and I think it carries a good connotation, but nevertheless, that we're going out of Egypt to really develop a significant relationship with God. So coming backwards into the concept of like, well, if I'm Noahide, am I going to accomplish any of this? I'm not going to have this opportunity. Please remember that it's not God doesn't make mistakes for who's born to whom and where. And it's stated, if anybody's done any reading of the Noahide, that a person who follows the Noahide laws is considered that he has really accomplished, um, like the Kohen wrote all the great priests. And despite what it may seem like, what am I doing? What's the ritual? Um, there are I can't impress enough because I've been on again both sides of the street, and I've grown up many years religious, and I would say that many of you are recognize you have talents and abilities, okay, and that are critical to society. And as I mentioned before, I heard one Talmudic saying that you save one life, that's if you save the world. Now that can go from the positive, like a rescue, or a prevention. Some of the most difficult societies that we generated seemingly from one person. And some of the greatest people in the world, leaders, people who develop discoveries, one person. So don't take lightly that you're not involved in what seems to be, this is what I would imagine is God's way. And God's way is doing what he wants, not what you think he wants. So then that requires learning. I mentioned before, learning what the Torah says for a person who isn't Jewish. And really, in some ways, you have a clear sailing to accomplish, because this world has to be refined. The Jews have their mitzvahs for refining the world. And if you look into the Noahide mitzvahs, that they're loaded with opportunities and situations and desires that can really turn this world around. I don't know if, I mean, I span a couple of generations, and I wasn't in War II, but definitely during the Vietnam period and it was a long period, a difficult period for this country, and other Israeli wars and other situations we've been in, different presidents, confrontations, that making the world a safer place and raising um, righteous people who care about other people, care enough that they will hold themselves back from doing something they think at that moment is what they want to do, usually emotionally. So this is an exquisite opportunity to fulfill an area where God wants this world to be refined. And it's hard to say what's going to be the crowning glory. I'm going to bring up two related concepts. One is called Gestaltschluss, or it's a downward, it's a progression, a chain-like progression. One thing happens, and something else will happen. I guess maybe the clearest thing is like if you plow the field and plant the seeds and water it and weed it, you'll have a crop. A crop. That's kind of like a chain-like progression. Although when I lived in Iowa and I saw what it takes for farmers to produce a crop, you had the weather, is it time to plant yet? Is the winter really over? The storms are over. The insects, drought. Um, I'll tell you the truth, for a small town, I don't think I saw so many houses of worship because they realized that all these things entail a blessing with God's hand in there. But nevertheless, it kind of you can still use that as a chain of progression with agriculture, and I think industry even more so, and hopefully education. But there's another area, and we function maybe come normally between the two. We call it gestaltless, which means like you make your effort, you do what it takes. You don't expect necessarily. There's nothing you can really definitely expect to occur. As you probably have heard, they said the reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah, which is like, where's the bank, or and or how do I, avoid this medication? I'll just do this mitzvah. In part, it's kind of true, but it's not a progression, a chain-like progression. You make yourself a vessel, you prepare yourself, you try to petition God, and it's up to him how and when he's going to fulfill that activity. And there's some mitzvahs they say really, most of it you're going to find in the world to come, which is a whole new subject. But there's also many mitzvahs they say that the fruits will be in this world, and the stems or the stalks of the tree, the trunk of the tree, will be in the world to come. So don't take it lightly. You have the mitzvahs of Noachide. I think if you really look into it, that they're clearly essential. And I've even tried to get into the school system to try to make some presentations. And despite the fact you have this separation of church and state, which I think is a smokescreen, and I'll get into that in another place. But you can't just always deal with problems, attack problems, cure problems, stop problems. You have to, like in medicine, they say that the greatest type of medicine is preventative. So I don't think it takes much to see if you have any little bit of involvement that you want to develop good people who won't be swayed by fake news, who won't be swayed by a persuasive person, of their own emotions, or stress, whatever that came from, and there are many. So if a person's given a foundation and you're part of imparting that foundation, I mean, first of all, you're going to be a better person, a leader, an example. And if you can influence someone else to do the same, you're taking part in prevention. Save one life, you save the world, and could be even more people. So these critical things, believing in God is the motivation for starting it, and it's the motivation for continuing it. And how to do that and what to do, it's very clear. Taking a life, murder, theft, adultery, improper, moral behavior. And we have tremendous examples of that in recent times where the effects are just rebounding continually. And of course, courts of justice. And as I mentioned before, I spoke to a relative of mine who was a district attorney, and I said, "Can you give me an advice for courts of justice? What a person can do?" He said, "Well, I'll tell you personally that I have to do juries. I have to select jurors. I look forward to having people who are jurors who I know I can relate to, who have education, and who can look at things with introspection rather than having people who, like such as that, avoiding jury duty." He said, "This is the foundation, one of the amazing foundations of this country, where it's trial by peers. It's incredible." Jewish religion has a also incredible system. And get into Jewish law and what that represents the difference in the normal secular system. But we do support the secular system because it's a good one in this country. Nevertheless, Jewish law also involves God directly, and not to people swear on the Bible, okay, but it goes beyond that. So if you are a part of making this world a better place in tangible ways, not just hoping for the God's spirit alone to come down and make things right. And hopefully soon with Mashiach being revealed and bringing on the redemption upon the redemption and really revealing godliness as it was primordially. So you as an Noahite have direct access to that. And if you want to be a Jew and you go through every years of learning and the change of lifestyle, okay, that's your business, and there's a way to do it. But Noachide is clearly something that's requested in the Jewish religion from God. So with that in mind, I would also add to that, if a person is floundering in the world, and most people who do that start to turn to like, why am I here? I need values. I need a reason for being. I need guidance. I need peers. And if we don't present an Noachide to them, then where might they turn? And unfortunately, we're turning in the wrong direction, because you have to wonder why one group is growing, and it seems like the countries are out of control. But how are they growing? So people are considering it, or they themselves have doubts. Where are they going to turn, except for Noachite, possible conversion to Judaism? But the Noachite is right there. So you're in an incredibly important position with incredibly important towns. And you're incredibly important to God. So don't look out and say, why am I not doing this? Or why couldn't I be doing that? You really have a wonderful armamentarium of ways to get closer to God and make the world a godly place, which is his desire. Thank you, and I hope to speak to you next week after the holidays.